Alright, here we go. For real this time. Senitz up against King Morgan. I should have changed the Twitch title. Oh well. King Morgan is going to be scanning off to the west. He's actually found some aluminum and carbon. Unfortunately, not really usable together in combination. And just a hair of silicon with some dry ice as well. So he's actually going to choose to just drop right in that crater. Bit of a risky play out of King Morgan. He's not going to have a lot of room to expand, but he does get down 2 carbon quarries and a nice aluminum mine fairly quickly that he'll be able to move around as necessary in order to pull in the right resource. Senitz, however, has been scanning off to the southeast. He has found water, 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 and more water, of course, with just a splash of carbon and a little iron as well. Going to have to see what he manages to do in order to stay in this game. He's not going to want to found too terribly late at this point. He wants to go ahead and get founded in order to actually keep up with his opponent's production this game. However, it looks like there's just not a great place for primary resources right now. Not a lot of aluminum going on at all, most of it right next to his opponent. And not a lot of carbon either, with just a nice little triangle, and iron you can only get up to 2 at a time, and none of them are high. It's going to be a very difficult map, so Senitz is trying to figure out how to use it to the best of his ability. He in fact does just choose to go scavenger, also in a crater, and right next to a nice trio of carbon. He's just going to grab all that up and be pushing for an expansion very quickly. Unfortunately for him, what has occurred is his opponent managed to expand before he found it. His opponent also had very little carbon coming in. So King Morgan throws down quarries, gathers up some carbon, but then uses all of it to expand and then throw down more quarries, buying up more carbon, driving that price nuts. And so Senitz couldn't even immediately get down all of his carbon quarries because carbon had already gotten so expensive. Now, of course, carbon's just going to be plummeting pretty much all game, I would expect. As Senitz only has carbon production, King Morgan has, what, 4.5? 5 a second. 5 carbon a second right now. Coming in for King Morgan. That should be more than enough for both players, and we're just going to have to see how this game plays out. Pirates are definitely a more of a long-term play right now. The only thing piratable on the entire map is King Morgan's water. Neither player really going to want to go after that, so this is just kind of a I want these in my back pocket for later just in case type of scenario. Could be a very long time before those pirates become particularly viable. However, another option is to just drop them immediately on this water, which Senitz has opted for. And he paid a lot of debt for that. He paid a lot of debt for that, right? Clarify, debt, not cash. So he's trying to just turn that massive amount of debt into a little bit of money just to play catch up in this game, since he knows he is already so far behind from the founding phase. All right. Well, what's Senitz going to do? He does have quite a lot of carbon available. No, that's King Morgan, I apologize. Senitz has 90 carbon available. That's more what I would expect out of Senitz. And he really needs to go ahead and put down a building somewhere. There he goes. He's going to push for the water pump. I'm very concerned about upgrading without being ready to do anything with it. So a water pump's going to come down. What else is he going to commit to? He's actually trying to move into reactors very quickly. Whereas King Morgan also trying to go ahead and make that push into reactors, also grabbing up quite a lot of water in the process. We're going to have to see how these players move these buildings around as the game goes on. So the reactors will be a little bit better for Senitz, making a little bit more money, and next to his base, so he will have access to that fuel and oxygen right away. So I'm a little bit concerned for King Morgan on this move. On the other hand, it's going to be kind of difficult for King Morgan to lose this game in a lot of ways. He's had a 1 HQ advantage the whole time, getting his pick of the tiles, getting to choose and do whatever he wants in the entire world. Whereas Senitz, that has not been the case. He's been kind of forced into a corner, but he is getting into that strong reactor production. It's going to be making him some amount of money with adjacency bonuses gathered up. And I am worried that King Morgan is kind of forcing himself into a situation where he has to buy up a lot of glass in order to push to another upgrade, because that's all he's actually got available to him. He has a little water, but it's not really coming in because it's getting pirated. He has a little electrolysis, which is just sitting there costing him massive amounts of money because there are no adjacency bonuses. And I'm kind of concerned that King Morgan is going to have to keep pushing on through with his chosen path, and that his chosen path isn't particularly viable. On top of that, Senitz went ahead and committed the 4,000 to freezing out King Morgan's basic production. On the other hand, King Morgan, same thing back to Senitz with a power surge, knocking down his money making. So we're going to have a bit of a stalled out game here for the next few seconds.
The black market is online.
Okay. Geotherm finally comes on out for King Morgan. Senitz, once again, he's just sitting on 500 carbon and nothing right now, right? This is the concern about throwing down so much carbon at the start of the game, especially after you've gotten started quite that late, is when that's all you have, you really have basically nothing. Because, yeah, it says $13. Once he sells like 100 of these, it's down at 1. So he actually has no cash on hand whatsoever. Senitz going to push for 14,000 pirates again. Very reasonable thing for him to do in a lot of ways. He knows he's got to do something serious in order to stay in this game. He's just going right after King Morgan's fuel, oxygen, and water. Water not really worth so much. Fuel and oxygen still worth quite a bit, but fortunately for King Morgan, both of those actually go ahead and make it on through for the time being. And now water is the primary thing that's going to be coming through here. And it's going to be coming through way faster than fuel and oxygen, considering those just aren't producing very fast out of a single electrolysis reactor with no adjacency bonuses.
The black market.
All right, King Morgan, he's got not a lot of carbon, but carbon's $8, so that's not really a big deal. He does have a little fuel and oxygen that he's going to want to sell off, so it's not getting consumed. There he goes. Buying into glass, he really wants to push for an upgrade right now. That's really pretty much where he's at. Neither player making any money. Senitz will be making money first, though, because he already has the building set up. He's just waiting for them to turn on. Whereas King Morgan, he doesn't really have anything anywhere to make money. And that's a serious concern, especially because he's gone ahead and committed to this geotherm as well. It's the single most profitable building by far, the single most profitable building on this whole map by far. But it doesn't actually make money because it's simply paying down his debt. I'm very concerned about King Morgan. I'm worried that he stalled out too much by throwing down these two waters, by placing a single reactor without any adjacency bonuses. He might even want to turn this off, potentially. Nope, he's going to send fuel on through. One option is to shut this down, keep it from sending, and force the pirates to steal water instead of this 40 fuel that just went on over to Senitz. That's quite a lot of cash. We're talking a good, what, $3,000? Maybe? Hold on. No, not $3,000. What am I talking about? I can't math right now, guys. It's $1,200. But still, $1,200 is a lot of money. Easily enough to buy up quite a bit of glass on the way toward an upgrade, which King Morgan so desperately needs. On the other hand, Senitz has managed to also push into food production. So now Senitz has ridiculous amounts of income. He scrapped the carbon. He said, I don't really need more than the 6 billion carbon I already have available to me. Thank you very much. And he's just moved into more and more ways to make money. Both of them hit the upgrade at about the same time. Senitz to HQ level 3, King Morgan HQ level 4. We're going to need to see some transitions into serious ways to make money out of King Morgan. He is going to need to get some glass furnaces down. He is going to need to potentially get this reactor some friends instead of just sitting there letting it cost him money this whole time. It could have been a reactor instead of a second water pump. There are just all kinds of slight errors here that have added up to a big problem for King Morgan, despite his HQ advantage and his stock advantage, because he's still not making money. All right. Slant drilling coming out. Well, just it's not all that amazing, this game, but it is still usable. Both players would get some benefit out of this. And so I could see it going for quite a bit, but maybe not as much as it would in a multiplayer game with resources flying around everywhere.
14,000.
All right. 14,000 over to King Morgan for that auction. That might be worthwhile, but realistically, all it's doing for him at the moment is turning this water from a low water into a high water. So he's doubled his money made off this water pump, and it's now pulling in a whole $18, oh, sorry, $21 a second. That's kind of my concern about slant drilling. It's a very long-term play in a very short game. All right, see, $100 a second off this food, almost per tile. I mean, that's going down over time because he's making a large amount of food, right? But it's still a lot of cash, and we can see very quickly Senitz caught up to HQ level 4, and now he can do basically whatever he wants. He doesn't need to take more carbon. He's already got carbon established if he needs to transition back into it. He had a ridiculous amount stored up, and finally the power surge comes down from King Morgan onto Senitz farms. However, it might be too little too late because Senitz is already he's already caught up. He's getting down solar panels, interestingly enough, planting them right next to King Morgan's geotherm. I mean, I kind of get the basic idea, right? At least they're not going to get black marketed out. But that's kind of an interesting little placement for your solar panels. Still, though, good money. They're on medium tiles, 3.2 power a second, 3.3 power a second from the combination of them. That'll pay off his debt very, very nicely, and his stock price should start catching up to King Morgan's fairly rapidly. As King Morgan, I believe, is still buying so much food right now that it's also costing him a large amount of debt. Black market's starting to wear off. King Morgan did manage to push into plenty of glass furnaces. However, they still aren't anywhere near as profitable as Senitz food. He is going to have to make a transition into something that makes real money before long. Instead, he's opted for a solar panel, once again, off on its own with no adjacency bonuses. That is a bit of a concern. And we're just going to have to see if King Morgan... Well, King Morgan's just going to have to stop making mistakes at this point, is more or less what it comes down to. This solar panel, it's paying off 100 debt a second, but who cares right now? Your opponent isn't going after you yet. You don't need to worry about your stock price yet. You need to find some way to make cash. You need, quite frankly, to transition into food. That is the only resource on this map right now that's really worth worrying about, is food. This is making a ridiculous amount of money for Senitz, and King Morgan needs to find some way to shut that down. Glass is dying off fairly rapidly. I'm very concerned that King Morgan has just simply been selling off glass this whole time instead of using it to make a strong transition. I don't know if or when either player will make it to an upgrade with aluminum going quite this crazy. That means an upgrade isn't really an option for Senitz, and we might need to see a bit of a left turn into a special building like a hacker ray. Cold fusion comes and goes as expected. Might have been able to actually pick that up this game. Might have been able to. It's a single player game. All the resources are a bit more predictable. Sorry, not a single player game, but in a two-player game, one-on-one. All the resources are a bit more predictable, right? You can kind of see where everything is going, and maybe you take yourself out of power, even having committed to just one geotherm, or just that one geotherm, for example, off King Morgan. He's only really spent one tile that he has to have in power. And so I'm very concerned about this, like, lack of actually picking up cold fusion, because there's plenty of water available on the map to make it viable. It just eases things up for you a bit in a 1v1. Could have been taken. Senitz also, I want to point out, has taken advantage quite heavily of King Morgan's glass production, has gone ahead and thrown down silicon production of his own. And at this point, what has happened is Senitz might actually manage to make more money off of King Morgan's glass than King Morgan did, purely from selling silicon back into the market. EMPs continue to rain down on the farms. No big surprise. These are still massive amounts of money, but the way you deal with this isn't just by black marketing it out. It's a nice play. It's a nice thought, but it doesn't solve the problem, because food is going to continue to go up in price if food isn't being sold to the market. You have to get into the resource yourself in order to put yourself in a good position. Now, Senitz is sitting on about 36,000 in funds. King Morgan is sitting on about 1,300. You can kind of see the basic issue here that we've been talking about, where Senitz has been catching up, Senitz has been making money. And suddenly both players have decided that now is the time to go ahead and start moving into each other's stocks. However, Senitz has the production, he has the cash on hand. King Morgan doesn't. He might have just ended up poking the bear and removed any chance of him coming back into this game. These glass furnaces costing $40 a piece. This carbon not really making anything. His aluminum, his only real valuable tile on the board, both of them being mutinied away by Senitz. I don't see where King Morgan's possible advantage lies, and Senitz has managed to pull himself back into this game very effectively, primarily on the backs of those early reactors, making small bits of cash into the farms for huge amounts of cash. And even with a dust storm popping up, I don't see the course of this game changing. That's still $100 a second per tile that's online, and we're going to have 4 of them online momentarily. King Morgan, do you have anything? I don't see anything. I just don't see anything for King Morgan. I'd like to make it a little bit closer. I'd like to say, man, that was a close game. But frankly, Senitz putting on a clinic on how to actually get something done, how to actually make money even when you've fallen behind. And King Morgan showing how to throw away a nice solid lead. Alright guys, this should be wrapped up fairly quickly. We're just waiting on the cash to come in. The dust storm got in the way of the game ending, let's be honest. But right now, Senitz only needs a good 42,000, I think, to clean this on up for himself. One more stock and then one stock at about double price. It's going to be about 42, 45,000, depending on exactly how much is left over in change for King Morgan. Let's see, 29 is going to be the rest after he buys up that last little bit of stock. King Morgan just sells out. He knows the game is over. He doesn't want to try and draw it out. He knows he has nothing left in the tank and that Senitz is moving on at full force, so we should just see that buy momentarily. There it is. All right, guys. Let's take a look at what happened in that game. It's fairly straightforward, right? King Morgan made about $60,000, most of that in aluminum, frankly, which is not really where you want to be. His glass not making him all that much money after having to buy up the silicon and actually costing him money also buying oxygen, right? So even if we're not counting the glass purchased earlier in the game, which is part of what beefs up that glass price to the point where you can make money on it later, even if we discount that, he spent $24,000 on silicon and oxygen together. He made about $19,000 on the glass. Not a whole lot. Whereas if we switch over to Senitz, right, he made $75,000 on food this game. About $30,000 total on the reactors when all was said and done. Made $30,000 on silicon, maybe $25,000 on silicon, right? And then about $10,000 on glass for whatever length of time. He had a small amount of glass production down for a short period of time. And then got out of it when it was time to get out of it and had the silicon production to actually make good use of it. All right. It was fairly straightforward, honestly. King Morgan just stalled out completely. It was, in particular, it was this variety of buildings. He did finally get into food eventually, but it was just too little too late. It was these buildings here. There were 2 water pumps and just like 1 reactor, and they weren't doing anything. On top of that, he'd forced himself into that awkward situation by founding in this crater. It's a lot safer just to be like, you know what, I'm going to found in the middle of all this dry ice and then reach on into the crater just fine. So that was very well done by Senitz, going ahead and managing to keep himself in this game after a very late start on a very awkward map. All right. That's really all we need to look at. Look, the foods tells the whole story. We're going to hop on out of here and head into game 2.